Hello and welcome to the last part of our Band of Brothers cast reunion interviews. Wow. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more seriously today. We're going to be talking about the responsibility of representing real men on screen, especially when you know those real men. So we're going to be talking to the guys about their relationships with the veterans as well.
Normandy, you didn't have to go out there to film it, but Woody, our Bodfest coordinator.
You know, you all know I make my my bread and butter taking people to battlefields and have done for 20 years. And so it's just that the open question is, what is it like for you guys that you've now had the opportunity, some of you, to return to battlefields? I mean, Robin, you've been to Bastogne, you've been to those places, and Rick, you have as well. And has it changed you? Do you wish you'd done it before? I mean, what's it actually like visiting the real places? That's it. That's my question.
Rick Warden, who played Harry Welsh.
Well, can I answer that a bit?
Yeah, please do.
Paul, you know that I've got a history degree, but my speciality wasn't anything to do with the Second World War. It was First World War and modern memory. So I actually, during my time at university, had a trip over to the Western Front, and so visited Peronne, sites of the Battle of the Somme and Passchendaele as well, in Ypres, into Belgium. So that experience of battlefields for me, I'd had before, and so it wasn't necessarily new to me. But I guess the difference is, I was just thinking about modern memory and the show, and I've heard things said on here so far. I think it was Ross who brought up the word detail. I think Michael might have talked about love and the kind of care and attention taken to stuff on the show. And it just strikes me that, so I'm not really answering your question, am I really? I've just gone off on a ramble.
Do it. Ramble away.
But Rick, listen, Alex is going to be your new best friend because she is a World War One historian.
Well, no, but the truth is that hey, Alex.
Yeah.
The truth is that if you haven't been to the Western Front, you guys, and I know, Paul, I'm sure you'd have done that anyway.
Yeah, of course.
It's something else to visit those sites. And we studied things like, culturally, war memorials. So I remember statues at Ypres that are designed to weep when it rains. And it strikes me that when things are done, because I did so badly at my degree, actually, history as part of my penance has followed me around as an actor quite a lot. But nothing like the way the Band of Brothers history has followed me around. And it strikes me that if a TV show puts that much effort and energy and attention to detail into something, and money too, let's not forget that, it can be a little bit like that statue that weeps when it rains. It can actually form part of modern memory about war. And really, I'm getting back to your question now because I'm beginning to grow my brain again. Those visiting of those sites, isn't it interesting what's going on at the moment with lockdown? I think the First World War used to feel a long, long way ago to me, a long time ago when I studied it when I was a 19-year-old. It sort of feels closer now. And I think the Second World War, that's it, even more so. It's really not that long ago.
Yes, George Calil, who played Mo Ali.
I mean, there's easy answer and very hard answers to that question because I'd never seen any of them until you took me, you and Eric, between you.
Good old Eric, yeah.
Took us on a few very lovely walks and experiences, and I know you sent me a question about this, about why do I come from somewhere far away, and it made me laugh when I read it, Paul, because the very first time I came, I paid for it myself, and the reason that I paid for it was because of I mean, you see it today, because of all of you, because of all of us, because because of you, Paul, because of Robin, because of Tim, because of everyone who's on this. I say them because they were right in front of me, not because anybody else, Michael, and everyone who's on here. But I think Michael said it. What a great example of choosing people, and these guys are. Band of Brothers changed my life, and it's because of everyone who is involved, not just who's here. But so seeing those sites, I hated war. I really, when I went to boot camp, and I'm sure Tim will, the guys that were there will remember. I said something very stupid to Captain Dye about how come the U.S. Army has the biggest rate of blue on blue in the world, and I got shouted at and kicked out of the mess, and I ran outside. And funny enough, the one English member of the cadre chased me outside. And at the time, I thought I was being clever. And I didn't think I was being clever. I believed what I said. But then when you see the reality of it, and you see what it really means, and you at least I came to realize that it's the only just war in history. Like, I mean, Rick will correct me, but World War I was fucking Duke's vanities, and but
it's one of those ones where you look at it and there's no one is in the wrong, they just can't agree. World War II, there's something tangible and evil that needs eradicating.
Yes. Bertrand Russell was talking about World War I, and I was listening to him on YouTube, and I couldn't believe it, because they asked him what he would change in history, and this is my favorite philosopher, and he said he would have had the Germans win World War I and not had the Americans get involved, or the British. And he said, I said, why? And he said, because it would have been over quickly and decisively, and millions of young men would not have died. And just to come back to what Paul was saying, is that Paul, it brings it home, and you bring it home, brother. And thank you for doing this.
And just as a postscript to that, what I was rambling on about, Paul, what's interesting is when these guys now talk about, when we talked earlier with Matt Settle about the foire scene, and the running through. Now, and Robin, you'll back me up with this, and all the guys who have seen the spaces. Now I see the places in my head, obviously. Mm-hmm. I've been there, so I can see that. I can see that corner of the building that's had the what is that rifle fire against it in Foire there.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I can see, I've been to Carentan.
Yeah,
so
Carentan, Dead Man's Corner.
I know how me and Rick Gomez against the wall, and where we pull the pin and run across the rock. I've stood Rick, there, man.
Yeah, Rick, I had that with Scotty Gordon 2 years ago when he came to Normandy. We went and we saw the foxhole where Ali pulled Scotty out of the foxhole. Well, pulled his father, excuse me, but pulled his father out of the foxhole. It's a bit.
I mean, in particular, I think Bois-Jacques. The Bois-Jacques.
Yes, that's the one for
so
me.
Evocative that you.
Yeah.
Has ever
I
the
went to
wood,
Breakout
man?
Manor.
Oh, the wood is just.
Peter O'Meara, who played Lieutenant Dyke.
It's because of the show that we got to go to Brerecourt Manor and get this access to the fields and meet you and get all this incredible kind of information behind the scenes. I'm just fascinated by it. Like it's really something. And when you stand in that field and you look at the gun positions or sort of try and imagine them, well, you sort of get the vibe. When you get the feeling in Normandy of what it was like, what it must have been like on those days. It's such an important thing, I think, for young people to go and experience. Or, I say young people because look what's happening in the world. There's a lot of World War II history that's not being taught, and particularly in America, sadly, but it needs to be. The power of historians and retelling and just putting that in perspective for our younger next group, and for the adults and for the youngers, is so important. I'm grateful for what you guys do, and I look forward to bringing my kids there and making them learn something.
Tim, is it right you in particular really got into the history after being in Band of Brothers?
More after joining seeing the battlefields.
Yeah.
First trip you came, you were a rabbit in the headlights, weren't you?
Yeah, my first trip to Normandy which was what, 2 years ago, was the big
ish.
eye opener. Yeah, there was a huge realization that I hadn't had when we shot it. I was more interested in other things. I've been acting since I was 11, so it was another job, really. That sounds really callous, but I didn't have a huge role. Or I didn't realize the significance of it when I got cast, so I wasn't hugely ignited by the historical significance of it. That wasn't who I was then. So when I went to Normandy recently, apart from the fact that I hooked up with these guys and remembered what an amazing experience it had been, as if it were yesterday, I finally came face to face with, I guess, some of the more visceral sort of elements of what it may have been like for these guys. So yeah, it absolutely brought that alive. And yeah, had a few little moments when I was there.
So let's talk about the responsibility. How do you even begin getting ready? Matt Settle, who played Lieutenant Spears.
I guess, I don't know, I absorb the energy of everyone around me.
Yes, Peter?
That question of did you do right by a veteran, I think haunts all of us. Well, certainly me as well.
Go on, Philip Barantini, who played Skinny Sisk.
It was just an honour to play somebody who's been through that. It felt like an honour that we had to sort of, portray these people as best we can and do them justice of what they've done in the world. So yeah, just the whole time when we were shooting, it was just had that in the back of your mind that you've got to do this. You've got to be as respectful as you can and do a good job.
Yes, Jason O'Mara, who played Thomas Meehan, Easy Company commander, who tragically was killed before setting foot in France.
It's hard because, on the one hand, we talk about plot and character. On the other hand, we're talking about what really happened in real life. And what happened to Stick 66 was a tragedy, I mean, it was the command stick and it went down in a fireball. And it burned because of the amount of Bangalore torpedoes on board. It burned for 2 to 3 weeks in a field. And when I was one of the webbing guys on the show towards the end of my time there said, "Are you going to that memorial service in Bouzeville-Plain?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, there's a memorial service next weekend. If you want to go there, they're unveiling a stele, they call it, plaque, a new plaque." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll check it out." So I got on the boat, brought a friend, and I got on the boat and I drove to Normandy, to Bouzeville-Plain, and talked my way into the church, mentioned Band of Brothers, mentioned Steven Spielberg in some pidgin French. And they once they understood Steven Spielberg, they let me into the church. And I was able to be there for the mass, the ceremony, and then afterwards we went outside. And just before they unveiled the memorial, a squad of paratroopers came marching sort of over the bridge and down the hill towards us. And there was a major with them in their full dress, and they brought a bugle as well, and they showed up. This squad of paratroopers showed up for this unveiling of the memorial with full colors, bugle, salute, and it was unveiled, and they played taps, I think, and then they turned around, marched back down the hill and back to their bus. It was just amazing. It was just, it was a really it was formally done. It was classily done. They showed up on time. They did everything they were supposed to do. It was the right way to honor that particular occasion with the right people. Anyway, afterwards, and the memorial's in the shape of the tail of a C-47. Yeah. And afterwards, I was asked by a couple of guys who call themselves the Forced Landing Association, a couple of Belgians. And they said, "Do you want to come and see the? Do you want to come and see the field where?"
I was going to ask you. You've actually been to the field then? Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, "Of course I do." You didn't have to ask me twice, you know. So so we walked down to the fields. It was a quarter of a mile from the church, and I pointed to this very dark patch, and they said, "That's where it burned for 2 weeks. Grass still doesn't grow there." And this was what 2000, 2001? 2000, I think it was.
2000 was the monument, yeah.
Yeah, grass still doesn't grow here. So I was just amazed. And they said, "Listen, we've spent some time in this field with, metal detectors and such, and we've come across a couple of things. Do you want to see them?" I said, "Sure." And one of the things was a detonated M1 rifle bullet, and he handed it to me and he said, "You may as well have this because, this doesn't belong to anybody really. It kind of belongs to the US Army. So you may as well have it. It's no use now. It's damaged." And I was like, "Thank you." So I have that. I've kept it. It's right over there. And then they handed me this ring, and on the inside of the ring was etched TM.
Yeah. Which
could only really have been Thomas Meehan, that they found deep in the dirt, in the soil. And I held it in my hand, and that was the moment when I realized that we could talk about character and we could talk about plot and we could talk about dialogue, but this was a real man who really lived and really died. And the tragedy of that, that he was in his early 20s. And he was trusted enough to be made the commander of these men, He must have been quite an extraordinary character. And you're right, he probably would have been able to lead them with a great deal of success for quite deep into that campaign. Anyway, I gave the ring back and said thank you. And I asked if there was any way to return the ring to the family. And they said, "Well, that's what we do. We try to get some of these personal effects that we find from these forced landings, these essentially shot down planes all over Europe, and we try to return them to the families. Sometimes it's hard. Some of the men were so young, they don't have a whole load of, they don't have any progeny. Some of them weren't even married. So oftentimes they're looking for, at this point, grandnieces, grandnephews, cousins, to try to return some of these effects to some degree of family. And it's not easy, but they do a great job, those guys.
It's just to finish that story, it's on display in the museum. It's on display in Carrington. They've got the ring and there's Meehan's dog tag, and there's some other bits and pieces, because they did contact the family. And if I'm remembering correctly, the family said, it's not that we don't want it, it's just that it would be better staying in Normandy so that other people can see it. And so it's on display there.
So, Mark, your character William Dukeman dies in Holland, of course, in an incident many of the Easy veterans recalled with great sadness. Have you ever had a chance to visit his grave, and how was it? Do you think there was extra responsibility playing one of the men who were killed?
Well, during the show, I obviously didn't get to meet my character because he died in Holland. And after the show, I felt a sense of guilt, actually, because you get people coming up to you saying what a fantastic job it was, and what a great show this was. And it wasn't me that did these things, it was Dukeman that did these things. So for a long time, I didn't want to go and visit his grave. Now I live in Colorado, which is where he's from. I married a girl from Colorado, so I've been to his hometown, seen where he was born, saw his house where he was born. I got the tattoo of his service number on my arm, and I'm sort of like a Dukeman junkie now. The day I got killed, or my character Dukeman got killed, we shot it only once, and it was a night shoot, so it was middle of the night, pitch black. Tom Hanks is directing that one, and it was just eerie, like nobody spoke to me hardly, because they sort of knew that it was coming. And after we did the shoot, and I got my chest exploded, all that kind of stuff, I sort of broke down a little bit, had a cry, mostly because the paycheck was ending. but no, it was an amazing set to be on, because everything was so real, so realistic.
Richard Speight, who played Skip Muck, was there extra responsibility if your character died?
Absolutely. I think that responsibility extended not just from the beginning of production, but all the way through everything. There was I tell this story a lot because it really requires a perspective that predates the internet. But you couldn't just research things, even though the internet was a thing. It wasn't the thing it is now. You couldn't readily access archives the way you can now. And I remember getting a phone call. Production gave me the number of a couple of veterans to speak to as reference, and it was Bill Garnier and Don Malarkey. My first phone call was to Don Malarkey, and had a conversation with Don Malarkey. And I'm some dopey actor in Los Angeles who's excited to play a job, and I'm like, I got my notepad, and I'm going to ask him questions about my guy, and I'm going to really get to know him through this man. And we talked about 30 seconds before Don Malarkey burst into tears and hung up the phone, which made me realize, oh fuck, I just ripped a scab off. I didn't mean to rip, and this is no bullshit. Like, I just stepped in it, and I'm going to be in this for a while. And I remember speaking to him again later, and just this time with the appropriate attitude and being very cautious in my questioning and mentioning I wanted to find the family. I felt like that I needed to talk to the family because everybody else was given a wife or a brother, or not everybody, but the majority of people had some reference, a child, if their veteran had passed away. But Skip never married, never had kids. I just remember saying to Don, I'm like, what part of Florida was Skip from? Because it said in the script, in the movie theater scene, I was in Florida and then I came here. And he's like, he's not from Florida. He's from New York. He's from upstate New York, a city called Tonawanda. And that was sort of the first domino to fall in the journey, where I literally looked up all the mucks that I could find in New York State and was just randomly calling people. And when that didn't work, I sent an email to the Chamber of Commerce for the city of Tonawanda right before we started boot camp, sort of explaining who I was, explaining the project, and trying to figure out if I could get any intel from the city. We went to boot camp, came back, and I had an email. That's 2 weeks later. I had an email from a woman saying, hello, my name is Eileen O'Hara. And my mom got a call from the Chamber of Commerce saying you were asking questions about her brother who died in World War II. Wow. Can I help you? Wow. So I got on a phone call with her, and I said, hey, we're doing a mini series about Band of Brothers, and I would like to talk to your mom or you guys about your uncle. And she said, what's Band of Brothers? And I said, we're making a mini series of the book. She goes, what's the book? What are you talking about? And they didn't know. I said, you don't know that your uncle's war efforts are chronicled in this, revered book? And they said, no, last we heard was a Western Union telegram in 1945 saying he was dead. That's the last we heard of it. So thus began my sort of back and forth with, it was Becky Kranowski and Eileen O'Hara and Ruth LaFleur, who was his Skip's sister. And we swapped. They ended up sending me color copies of the Western Union telegram. My walls at the Marsham Street were just pasted with letters. A letter was never opened because it was returned deceased. They still never opened, but they sent me a copy of the envelope and everything that had the deceased stamp on it. I got all these letters to him, from him, was talking to the mom. At one point, the mom wrote me a letter, a detailed letter, just talking about her brother. And it was interesting because I really did rip a scab off there too, because they didn't know anything about how he died. They never got his personal effects. And so I said, rather than me tell you the story, go read the book so you can get to know everybody. And they did, and they got to, but nonetheless, it was very emotional for them to read that book and go on that journey. And that, I think, opened up Ruth to start writing letters. And she wrote me a letter telling me the story about Skip swimming the Niagara River. And she wrote this whole letter about how before he went to boot camp, he wanted to swim the Niagara River, so he did, and his girlfriend Faye was all upset. And she sent me this letter, and I took it to David Frankel, who was directing at the time. I said, this is unbelievable. Like, we've known nothing about this guy. The only fact I've gotten about this guy was that he wasn't from Florida. He was from Tonawanda, New York. So when we did episode 5, I went to Tom Hanks, who was directing. I said, hey, it says, Muck says I was in Florida, but now I'm here. He's not from Florida. Can I say where he's really from? Like, I don't want to wing it and do improv, but he's from Tonawanda. Can I say that? And he's like, yeah, man, do what you want. So, but that's about all the intel I had. And here we got this letter. We got this beautiful letter about swimming the Niagara River. And this and what a moment that was for him and his sister before he flew off to war. And I showed it to Frankel, and Frankel's like, we're going to aim a camera at a foxhole, and you're going to just tell that story. So, Tim and I sat side by side. Gomez sat across from us. It gave us a chance to create a moment between these 3 dudes so that when Luz Gomez was crawling towards our foxhole, you've seen these guys bond, because other than that, there was nothing in the script that bonded those guys together. We were bonded in boot camp, but that's not on camera. There was no story point that connected these guys. And suddenly I had this letter, this real story. And Frankel was astute enough to know that it mattered in terms of the grand scope of who these 3 guys are and who Skip is. And if we're going to connect him at all, other than just a guy in green, let's give him some humanity. And so I just told that story.
Tim Matthews, who played Alex Pancala.
Well, I was just didn't you discover that Muck and Pancala were both from upstate New York, somewhere not too far?
Why you ended up sitting in it, because we didn't know that either. Yeah. And so when she sent the letter, she mentioned Pancala. I'm like, oh, well, that's why you and I ended up doing it together, because we're like, well, then we should be there reminiscing about this. Even though Pancala wasn't there for that event, but he was there. They are connected by their region, and they can tell Luz's story, and they tell this story, and. I remember Rick came to the apartment the night before, and he's like, "Oh, I'll add the question about the barrel," and I'm like, "Yeah, oh, great, yeah, we'll make it more conversational." And the girlfriend's name I mentioned, Faye, was a real person who really was his girlfriend. And so after the series aired, Faye Tanner watched the series, saw that, and got back in touch with the Muck family and sent them back Skip's original jump wings, which he had mailed her. Wow. After Toccoa, and it really set the whole thing on a journey. I had this moment with HBO that was really, really weird, because your question is a loaded one. I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility playing somebody who had passed during the war, and I didn't necessarily think it got the full support it deserved. You kind of had to fight for the support a little bit.
Well, and
it wasn't the greatest job of all time, but
yes, Jimmy Madio, who played Frank Piconte.
Rich, you did. I remember you did, my friend, and you set that precedent early on, because and you made it clear. And I remember talking to you about it and what you did and what it meant to make sure that Muck was up there in cinematic history. And you did it, man. You went and you fought for that. It wasn't there. You went and fought for a lot, man. And I remember it. And I actually remember everything that you're saying.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is, like, for us, we're telling you guys who are reporting on this, but for us, we lived it in real time. We were all having these conversations all the time. I mean, like, Scott was part of the conversation about changing the name of the city in the movie theater, because that was our scene together. And Malarkey was our connected veteran. I mean, in a way, Scott had Don Malarkey, but then I also had Don Malarkey, so Scott and I would always talk to Don Malarkey. Like, everybody had this connected thing. And I remember HBO, and this is one of those things that you say that's maybe not the best thing to say in the business world, but the fact of the matter is that when the premiere happened, HBO invited the actor and their families, and they didn't invite the Muck family. The Muck family wasn't included in the invitation. And I wrote HBO. I started an email exchange. I said, there's been an oversight. You need to do this, because they are representing the man I played. And they sent back saying, we appreciate that. We understand that connection. However, we're limiting the tickets to families of veterans who are alive. And I said, then you're punishing my soldier for getting killed in the war, because I asked of them all of the emotional impact and help that you are asking of your people, of everybody else who had a sister or brother or parent or wife involved in this, and they had to get emotionally involved to help that actor deliver that story. I did that to these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to show them the same respect or I'm not coming, which was not like me. Yeah. But I also felt like HBO was a replacement and they needed to do their 20 fucking push-ups because I had done my goddamn job from day one. And I was not going to now be told that I was not wearing a uniform and now it was going to be fancy and we're going to be having cocktails on the beach, that suddenly it wasn't about the war. And I thought that was bullshit. That was a decision being made by people in suits who were not in the fucking mud when we made the show. And I was not going to stop doing my job because it was time to dress fancy. And luckily they did the right thing. Yeah. But it got under my craw. As you can tell, it still gets under my craw.
I'm sure that I remember you introducing me to them on the train, Mark's family. Yeah, because that's why I was like, wow. I'm pretty sure I remember them being there.
Yeah, they were there.
So
they got flown over there because they were the girls. They were the women I dealt with the most.
Yeah.
Eileen, and they flew over.
They were in Paris, right?
Awesome. And they got to bond with they'd never met anybody. All their Garnier and Malarkey, and they finally got to be a part of. They were as much a part of that experience as anybody else because they sacrificed a loved one for the greater good of the war effort, and they deserve to be a part of the honoring of that we were spearheading as the performers in Band of Brothers and as the production team behind Band of Brothers.
Rich, tell us about after the series for Muck's family.
The series begat some good stuff for them in terms of honoring Muck. Because he lost all his medals, they were able to lobby the Chamber of Commerce and their local and federal government representatives to get all of his medals reissued, which was great because that stuff never made it back to the family. And then the city of Tonawanda, with some help from some benefactors, built a monument to really all veterans of all wars, with a specific focus on Skip Muck and Fritz Nyland. And this goes back a while, guys, but Fritz Nyland was mentioned in the book Band of Brothers when Muck goes to London and they all hang out with some guys in another company. Then Fritz Nyland is the Ryan of Saving Private Ryan. It was the 5 Nyland brothers were the brothers on which Private Ryan was based, and Fritz was the one that got pulled out. And this is an interesting, I always think this is a fascinating little piece of cinematic trivia, is that the Nyland brothers were also from Tonawanda, New York, and Fritz and Skip were great friends. And when Skip Muck swam the Niagara River, and I did not know this when we shot the series, talking to your point, Paul, about things you learn later, but Fritz Nyland, so that if the current is too strong and you can't make it across, you die because you go over the falls. So when Skip swam the Niagara River, Fritz Nyland paddled alongside him in a boat to be sure that if he got too tired, he could cling to the boat. So you have Skip Muck, who ended up being portrayed in Band of Brothers, and Fritz Nyland, who ended up being immortalized in Private Ryan, sharing the same moment in the same river right before the war started. And so they built a memorial on the bank of the river where they shoved to make that journey. And so it's a specific tribute. I actually spoke at the dedication of that ceremony. That's going back a couple years now. But it's been nice to have everything that family went through to help me pay, return to them in goodwill from their community and from the representatives. So it's been pretty great.
Awesome. Beautiful. Matthew Leitch, who played Floyd Talbot, at the other end of the scale, you struggled with the responsibility since, and since, I think it's fair to say.
Dick Winters said that if he could take one soldier into combat, it would be Floyd Talbot. And then there's a 10-hour-long series where you don't see that. And of course I feature in certain episodes, but you don't really see why Dick Winters said that. As far as like you said, like a Breakout Manor or something, where you see he was tactical genius anything like that. And the reason for that is several-fold. Firstly, Tab died in 1982, and so he wasn't available to be interviewed. I was given quite a scant amount of literature as far as he was concerned, and so I guess the writers didn't have a great deal to work on in that respect. So that's one reason. But the real reason is that it's my fault. And that's because if you work in if you run an office, say, and there are certain people that are doing a lot of hard work, you're liable to promote them. And if there is a person who likes to sit next to the photocopier, eyeing up the receptionist and trying to get laid, you don't promote them. And there was definitely, in the first couple of episodes, people being felt out as to, what the story was going to be, who you're going to follow, and there were definitely certain actors who put themselves forward more, had more interaction with their veterans, the veterans' families, got those stories together, took them to the writers, took them to the producers, and helped flesh out and create more stories for their characters, putting the characters forward. And that's not being particularly political or sharp-elbowed, it's just being smart and doing your job. And to my lasting regret, I feel like I didn't do that a lot at all, really, when I think back about it. I'd come from doing a show where I was more the main character, and they just gave me a whole bunch of stuff to say, and I'd say it. And I'd never really worked on something like this, the size of this, before, and had to sort of do a lot of research on a character and find out about them and bring it to the writers. And so, in certain respects, I kind of almost coasted through it. I did what they told me to do. I think they liked what I did, and in certain cases they gave me more to do. But as far as actually bringing more to the story that the writers didn't know, which would only have happened through research, and Tab's two brothers were alive, so I did have that resource. Honest Indian, I just kind of didn't do it. That's a terrible thing to say. I don't know whether it was just stupidity or naivety, or a lot of the guys in the show had been actors since they were kids, and I wasn't one of them. I would only really just come out of drama school and done like a kids show. So when I look back, I'm not quite sure whether I can say I was super lazy or just super naive, or maybe a bit of both. But it would be ingenuine of me to just say it was just because there wasn't literature, wasn't there. I should have worked harder, and I don't know whether it was just my own kind of shyness to be able to go to producers and writers and say, look, I've got this, but I just kind of didn't do it. Yeah, it's something that I look back on with great regret. I feel like the stuff that I was given to do, I did well, but I could have brought more to it as far as doing the shovel work myself as an actor. So that's me probably admitting that for the first time.
Russ McCall, who played Leadgott, do you want to respond to that?
There's a double coin here in a sense, because I see what Matty's saying. You have to look at it. There were a few things that were happening too. Look, I didn't have a veteran. I had nobody to talk to about Leadgott. Mm-hmm. Nobody. I had no family members. I had one piece of paper with a picture on it. That was it. So the only times that I could actually get any information was to speak to the veterans who were still alive, who always talk about their brother and they don't talk about themselves. But there were also, a lot of the scripts were coming out and the stories were coming out, and people were going and talking to directors and talking to writers and sort of going, well, what about this and what about this and what about this?
Yeah.
And I did think that there needed to be a healthy balance, which I think the producers found in saying, look, it's still, of course, we would love to give everybody every story. There are people mentioned in the book that are not in the series. There are people who have big mentions in the book that are hardly in the series.
Yes, Rick Warden.
To an extent, any series has to be emblematic on some sort of
absolutely.
level. And you know, I knew Harry's story coming out of the plane was an extraordinary story, and it's not in there.
Yeah.
He was literally saved by the updraft of an exploding plane underneath him, saved his life and blew him high enough to land safely. You know, these details are extraordinary, and those stories are out there, but they can't all make the show.
Go on, Scott Grimes, who played Don Malarkey.
Matthew was an excellent dude and a great actor.
The great soldier, man. Yeah,
he's not one person. There is one person, but he's not here right now, and I don't even hardly remember his name. There's I got in a fight with someone on a truck once because he wouldn't put his helmet on. Whatever.
We know who you're talking about.
Matthew was fucking always there, always making us laugh, always doing his job. He was excellent. So if that helps him at all, man, I have nothing but fond memories of him.
Tim, go ahead.
In defense, I guess, of the, the fact that we were young actors who got a role. I mean, this is going to sound a bit crass, but I think it's important. I didn't sign something that said, I'm going to represent to the best of my ability and fight for to the best of my ability this person that actually I had no information about. I didn't have a very big role, so it's perhaps a bit different. But I think sometimes there's a little bit of romanticizing about perhaps what we all thought we were getting ourselves into versus what we got ourselves into. I mean, certainly I didn't fucking expect this. Right, we're still doing this now. It's amazing. I love it. I love it way more now than I did at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was 23. Like Matthew, I'd been doing quite a lot of TV. I'd been working since I was 11 years old, I think. So it wasn't my first role, and it wasn't a very big one. I was a bit disappointed, if I'm honest. It was from an actor's point of view. Didn't have much to work with. Didn't really have any info. Kind of got my head down and got on with it. Could I have done more? Absolutely. But there were a whole team of writers, producers, and directors, and everybody else who had opportunities to do that as well. Way before we were cast, I understand there were opportunities as things unfolded. Information comes up, and that's amazing. Wonderful that people were able to do things with it. But I think, I just wanted to say something, I guess, in defense of the young ignoramuses that some of us definitely
I also think that none of us should underestimate what we did contribute on whatever level it was on, because we are all here now talking about it, but it's true. And those guys, the veterans, even Johnny Martin, I'm sure there's complete anachronisms in terms of what was portrayed there. I, as an actor, as you all know, we all took our moment to go, all right, I'll get my helmet off here and I'll stand up front and I'll, whatever, those natural actor instincts or whatever it is, because you represent them in the way that you represent them. It's just that ultimately they're there and they are this band of brothers. It sounds a corny thing to say. And
I add on to what Dexter's saying there. It's something that Jimmy and I have talked about in the past couple of years when we've been, back in Europe, following the Easy Company steps and stuff. And we've had a chance to rewatch the show. And probably the same as everyone, I hadn't watched the show in 15, 16 years. I mean, I hadn't watched it in a long, long time. And we were not forced, but we certainly had time to sit down and watch this show. And you could sort of now detach from it and watch it as an audience member, as a professional in our profession, and no longer as the actor that was trying to see when they were on screen and whatnot. And the thing that Jim and I have both been really passionate about, and this sort of goes to what you were saying here, Tim, and what you were saying, Dex, every single person pops. And it's incredible. You watch the show and every single person, it doesn't matter if they have a small piece, it doesn't matter if you have a great one episode, it doesn't matter if you're spread out, every single person pops in that show in such an incredible way. It's really, it's fascinating to watch.
Jimmy?
Yeah, there's not many false moments, if any, in that entire series. It's I don't know if you guys have watched it in a while, but it is really fucking good. I'm not saying
it's good.
Go on, Rich.
Well, I gotta say, to piggyback on what you said, Tim, I think it's easy for us to sit here and romanticize even what I was saying. The question I was asked, like, I fought for and we got this scene. It seems easy to say in hindsight, but I sometimes think that my choices were questionable. And, I was very close to you, Scott, and Jim during that whole time. And there's a lot of things that were really fucked because I became mono-focused in a way. So, Tim, if Matthew's concern is that he erred on one side of the line, I might have erred too far on the other. Mm-hmm. I became like almost obsessed. It was my only, like, I'm not from England. I didn't have any family around me. I wasn't a married dude. I didn't have kids. I was like, I almost became hyper obsessed with this idea of doing the right thing, which is an unachievable goal because, as to Rick Warden's point, tons of stuff not going to make this movie. Like it's a movie. It's not a moment by moment reenactment of the entire experience.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy, but honestly, I fucked up Band of Brothers, and it's the biggest regret I ever had in my life, really, because you know when the guys were talking about that, you were talking to Alina or you were, Alex, about the last scene where you can't watch it.
Yep.
I filmed that last scene.
Yeah. And
they didn't put it in Band of Brothers, and I still feel I'm going to make light of it because I'll probably cry if I don't. I still feel fucking awful for Jim's family, who are friends of mine, and you know I didn't make the cut.
It was your first time after Birmingham Rep being on camera.
On camera, and you, God bless you, Matthew Settle, you told me not to look at you in a scene, and I asked you why, and you said, come over to Westminster. Do you remember? And I came to your flat.
And what did I say?
You told me how to act on screen.
Oh, I did? I fucking know. I know. I don't know what the fuck. I made that shit up.
But it made him feel better. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, no, I did try to give you confidence because, you know, as the youngest in my family, I had to fight for, you know, every inch of, you know, everything I got, right? And normally you get spoiled, but I was number 6, and I don't know, it's just a numbers thing. So I learned early on to, if you could be a champion for people who were scared, it helped you get over your own fear. So that was my way of dealing with my own fear. You know?
No, and when I was young, man, when you did it, I was like, who the fuck does Matthew Settle think he is? Tell me to come over to his flat. And 20 years later, you remember, man, you think, what a lovely man. Oh, dude.
It shows something about the pressure you guys felt about the representing, doesn't it?
Michael Cudlitz, you had an even bigger discovery than Rich's, didn't you? Talk to us about what it was like meeting the real Randleman.
Wow. Well, meeting the Randlemans was interesting because I think we were given contact information for those of us that had our vet. People were alive that still knew them or could tell stories of them, or they knew that they were friends. And I remember talking to Hashi, calling him up because he was one of the replacements, and they were like, he's the best that we could find for you to talk to, because obviously Denver's passed away and we can't find any of his family, so you could talk to Hashi. So I'm talking to Hashi for about 40 minutes, and at one point he says, well, you should probably just call him up and double check this. And I'm like, I would love to, but I think he's passed. And he said, oh shit, when did he pass? I just talked to him a week ago.
What the fuck?
I'm like, whoa. No, okay, hang on. No, I got this information. They've been looking for him. They have not been able to contact him at all. So if you talked to him a week ago or a week and a half ago, like hang on. He's probably still alive and they don't have the right information on their end.
That is incredible.
So I went and I said, I'll get back to you. So I called up the production office and I said, talked to Jennifer, and I said, I think I got information that he's still alive. So here's what I did. You know, you guys can call Hashi back and check with him what number he has and this and that. So about 4 days later, I get contacted and they're like, yeah, actually, he's alive. And he's in Texarkana, and we have his number, and he'd be more than willing to talk to you.
Oh, man.
So it's like, okay. So I know everybody's gone through this. If you've talked to even adjacent to their vet. I mean, I look back at it now, and I don't know if it would be any different, but I'm sitting there remembering looking at my phone, and it was probably the hardest phone call I've ever made. Because you sort of think, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to ask all these questions. But then when you go to make the phone call, you sort of go, how the fuck do I even start? Like, what is it? Hey, I'm the actor that's going to be playing you. How's it going? Which is pretty much how it goes.
Yeah.
We really got nothing back in return. He's like, hey, how you doing? So I'm like, so I was wondering if you could answer some questions. And he's like, yep. I'm like, and you're going through your mind, and you're sort of like, what do you even ask? Hey, how was the war? Like, where do you even begin with that? Like, tell me about your life. So it was a very interesting process early on. I got very, very little out of Denver at first. But like with many of the guys and their families and their family friends, he put his wife back on the phone afterwards, Vera. And I spoke to Vera for about 2 hours. Now, in retrospect, that's probably a better person to talk to than him about this, because we are all of us in this video, everybody walking through life, we know who we hope the world perceives us as. But the people who see you and actually love you and spend time with you, they know how you really are and how you really present to the world. I mean, you may think you're not a selfish person, but if everybody around you says you're a fucking selfish bastard, guess what? You're a selfish bastard.
It always used to be, like, we would talk about that with a lot of the vets too. Whenever you try to get information about your vet, going to your vet was probably the last person you'd go to, the other guy. The other guys,
because they're all exactly
talk about the brother.
Exactly, and they're all like, "Oh, no, it was no big deal." And you're like, "Are you kidding? That guy was fucking over the wall. He was in there." And if you talk to your guy, he's like, "Nah, it wasn't a big deal."
Yeah, let's talk about him. Yeah,
exactly. So there's a lot of that, but that's I would say that's pretty much the constant and the one sort of through line with all these is that the conversations with the families did start out very innocuous, very passive, very talking about things that didn't really matter. And the more that the trust was gained, and they had sent some people to set and some people were reporting back and they were getting more and more info. And the more they realized that the story was being told properly, the more the vets opened up to us, the more they opened up to their families, even during this process. And we were ultimately sort of absorbed into their families.
And it must have been weird for them as well, though, like to have this kid in front of you saying, "So I'm going to be you." How do you even process that? They must have been weird as shit for them.
It would have been. I look back and I'm thinking, I wouldn't have told me anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a trust exercise. You know, they were already leery of the book initially when Ambrose was doing the interviews. That was the sort of the same process. The more that they opened up to him and the more that he talked and they talked to each other, the more they wanted to talk to him. And then ultimately, I do believe there are some vets out there who wish they had talked to him who chose not to, because they saw how the story was done with so much love and care, which wasn't a given. You know, ultimately, when you really look back, it could have, had it not been done by, in the hands of Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and us, and everyone who played the background, our special ability background men and women who put so much into every scene and made us able to do the work we were able to do. Because honestly, so many of those scenes revolve around everything in the background working. And we've all seen it where you look and you're like, what the hell is that guy doing in the back? And that's the last thing you want. Everybody who was there to tell the story the best it could be told, the most accurately it could be told, and with the most love and care it could be told.
We had the best of the best in everything for the show, because everybody knew the story that we wanted to tell, and everybody was humbled enough to be a part of it. Everybody showed up and brought their A game.
that as a kid watching it, I know that for me, I'll level with you. I've rewatched that series. I can't tell you how many times, 9.5 episodes, because I've only ever once watched the bit where they start telling you the names under the old guys and they start telling you who's who. And the baseball game, I can't do it. I did it once. It destroyed me for days, and I've never done it again since, no matter how much I love the show.
Beautiful moment.
Let's talk more about the veterans. Philip, you couldn't talk to Sisk, could you?
Well, my character, Wayne Skinny Sisk, unfortunately passed away the year before we started shooting. So I didn't get a chance to speak to him. And a lot of the guys, no one had really been in touch with him anyway. When the war ended, he turned to drink a little bit, and then he became a pastor and turned to God. But I didn't get a chance to speak to any of his family. I'm not sure whether any of his family wanted to be involved in the project. So I didn't really get a chance to see any of those. But everybody that came on set, we had Bill Garnier and Babe and a bunch of the veterans came on set one for like a week or so, and they were just telling me stories about Skinny.
Ben, you were one of the cast who didn't get to meet the man you played, but you did get to befriend his family, including his son, Scotty. What was it like visiting the actual foxhole where Smokey was wounded with his son?
Yeah, I mean, very, very emotional to go there. I mean, it was one of those things I wanted to do. Obviously, I've been to France and been to Normandy and been to Carentan and visited quite a lot of the sites previously, but when the offer or the opportunity came up to go to Bastogne, I jumped at the opportunity, and it was one of those places that I'd always wanted to visit, and to actually go there and have the tour. I mean, the woods themselves are very eerie. There's a very eerie sort of feeling when you go there, as if something, clearly, I mean, obviously something very dramatic did happen there, but it's almost like the woods are almost kind of whispering with the amount of history and the amount of experiences that had taken place. But to actually go around and be able to see the foxhole was extraordinary. And obviously Scotty was there. We had some pictures taken, but you also had some moments to just reflect and to think about his dad. And I formed a great bond with Scott, and one of the greatest experiences on set for me was obviously meeting Betty, his wife, and Scott's sisters. They all came to set, and that was a very special moment to meet them in the first place. When they first came on set, I was in the middle of shooting a scene, and then I think they were sort of just hanging back, and then somebody came in and said, "Ben, I've got people that would love to meet you," and it was a really special moment to meet the family. And again, it sort of upped the stakes, as it were, because you suddenly, it became very real that you are telling somebody's real story, and there's a family whose legacy you are carrying, and the responsibility was huge. But they were very, very supportive. It was lovely to meet them. It was lovely to be able to spend some time talking to them and share, hear their memories and almost inhale some of that information from the people that knew him. And as I say, I've seen Scott at quite a few different events, and we've become very good friends. And when I was in LA last year and the year before, I met his Walter's granddaughter who lives in LA, and we've hung out a bit. And again, it's been really special. And whenever I've met up with her, she introduces me to all her friends. She works at the Magic Castle in LA, and she always introduces me as, "This is Ben, and he played my grandfather in that series Band of Brother." And it's almost like that Tom Hanks speech that made at the beginning of boot camp. What an amazing story to be able to sort of hang out with his family and to form that very special bond that we'll have forever. And they're always very very complimentary about my portrayal, and as I say, I just hope I did it justice.
Rick Gomez, you two couldn't talk to your vet, but again, you had a relationship with his family, didn't you? What's it like playing someone when you actually know their family?
Oh boy. It's I think all of us went through a bit of this. You feel like you have a responsibility, an incredible responsibility to get everything right. That's sort of, we've said that a million times, and we can say it a million times more, and be sincere about it every single time we say it, because there's no the weight of that was felt in every conversation we had with each other and every frame we shot. I know it's certainly anybody who was in anything with me, there was a weight. There was a weight even if you were, and honestly, the whole like clown of the company thing was sort of it's an odd thing because I never even thought about that. Like I never thought like, hey man, so now I got to come with a joke because I'm the comic relief at the moment. I just felt like shit was said when shit was said, and people did what they did in those moments, and those were the people they were. Those were those characters, and ultimately, I feel like every one of us in the 9-10 months that we shot, or 8 or 9 if boot camp is a month or whatever, everybody arced as human beings. Everybody I know arced. Mike arced, Rene arced, Ross arced. We all became different people by shooting it. And because they cast soulful human beings, that was all there. And that's the truth of what you'd go through in going through what the men went through. So that was just the experience of living through something. Honestly, we all changed. As far as the family, I just always wanted them to be proud, and Delphina, Del Luz, George's wife, before she passed away, we got to go to Normandy and ride the train together, and she held my hand for an hour and a half, and I mean squeezed it, and she rubbed my arm, and I knew I got it right. It was good. It was good enough for her. And so then any bullshit that kind of was in my head about like, oh, you could do more, you could do this, or why is that, blah, 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 it just kind of all disappeared in the glow of her smile and her appreciation of it. And so, I mean, man, that's all you can do. And I love that family. And anytime I get to see George, I see George the most because when we do something, we get together. I saw him a couple years back, right, Ross? When was Cleveland? A couple years back?
A year and a half, yeah.
Year and a half, yeah. So I get to see them, and it's great to have a beer and catch up and do all that. So that's always a fun thing to be able to do. But yeah, man, it's family forever. Well, not only just us, but the families we brought into that circle. It's a beautiful thing.
When did that start to dawn on you that you were going to get that out of it as well as a paycheck? Like
when I first talked to Del before the whole thing started, and we were on the phone for about 3.5 hours, I realized, okay, this is legit. Because I just started writing notes, and it was cathartic for her to go through it.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, oh, I know everything about this guy from a wife's perspective, and it's an interesting perspective.
But it wasn't about the paycheck either.
No, it wasn't about the paycheck ever.
No. Ever.
No,
it never was.
But I realized
we got a paycheck. Did we get a paycheck?
You guys got paid?
Peter Youngblood-Hills, who played Shifty Powers.
Tell us a little bit about the special relationship you forged with Shifty and what playing him has meant to you.
Well, I guess I met Shifty before we started filming, and he happened to live about an hour away from my mom in Clinchco, Virginia, and so it was kind of easy for me to access him. And his daughter Margot was very helpful with that. And at the time, I didn't know how to drive, and so she drove me up there, and we basically spent the time. I spent a couple of days with him, and that kind of started. He was such a beautiful, beautiful person, and really welcoming and very thoughtful. And obviously I was a naive, kind of stupid kid in many regards, and didn't really know what was going on. And he was kind of, just trying to help me as best as he could. And I think now I look back on it, and I look back on the moments that we shared, and it's like really, you just feel so deeply for those times that we shared, the relationship that we had. And I suppose that would go for a lot of the older generation, the elders, and that have been through things and been through so much of of where you know, where we've come from ultimately. And we're just kind of, I think with Shifty there was a way that he understood there was a through line of wisdom that he kind of understood about, you know, where he had come from and where he was going, and always so loving and humble in how he related to everybody else, you know. And it was kind of, we went on the USO tour where we, you know, later on we went to Japan and to Hawaii with One Lum McClung, and I think it was Buck Compton and Don Malarkey, and it was Jimmy Madio, and we you know, had a good time just, you know, learning about each other, and in the context of, you know, the you know, the world as it was then, and their love for, you know, what these men were going through, these soldiers were going through, what they faced. And you know, it reminded me, I guess, probably the thing that Shifty used to sit on his porch, and he used to sit on his porch in his holler in Clinchco. He's been there for all his life, and he would drink a cocktail, and he'd smoke a cigarette and look out into the woods, and that was his peace. And that was just what he did, and he would do that every night. And that's kind of, you know, you'd remember the good times and remember each other, and that kind of, it's grown within me. I don't know if it's almost like, you know, it's taken time for me to mature enough to understand what these guys were actually dealing with, what they were longing for, what they loved, and it's, you know, I'm kind of understanding a little bit more about that these days, and I think about him on his porch, looking out at his holler, and just kind of just pondering what home is.
You're getting old, Pete.
Yeah.
For me, I was always absolutely heartbroken by Spears' backstory. Didn't he get home from the war and his wife had gone, hadn't she?
That's what they told me.
Yeah,
He
did all that in World War II, and he got home and there was no one waiting for him.
Yeah, I always wondered about that, why he was looting so much. But, you know, there's nothing, was it Charles Bukowski said, there's nothing like a woman that can bring it all out of you, right? So, I mean, so he's over there in Zelensky and everywhere looting like the Dickens to try to keep a relationship. Then he gets home to the UK, and he finds out that the wife that he's been storing up all these treasures for, her husband comes back to life. That's the memory I have of his backstory. So his husband was in some prison camp over in Russia, to my memory. Does that sound right to everybody else?
It's if I may jump in here, what happened is Ron Spears got married to an English girl, and her husband had been missing for, I think, 3 or 4 years out in the Far East in Singapore. And they married, they had a kid, and then the husband turned up. And under English law, the only way they could rectify this was to annul the marriage. Spears loses his wife, but the kid he'd had to be raised by the actual previous husband.
Tim, go ahead.
Wow, Jesus, that's unimaginable, really. Not the kind of thing you expect to have to come home to, you know, when you've just been through all of that. I can't imagine. What a bittersweet set of circumstances for everyone, though. Like, you know, the guy's still alive. Great. You know, her husband. But, yeah, I mean, it's an impossible situation, isn't it?
Mark Lawrence, who played Dukeman, you couldn't talk to him, obviously, and that hurt, didn't it?
Because I never got the chance to meet him, you know, and I was quite jealous of a lot of the other guys because they got to hang out with their men, you know, go drinking and all that stuff with them and hear all the stories. And I was talking to Babe Heffron one day. He came on set, and he said to me, "Which character are you playing?" I said, "Dukeman." And he just started to break down in tears and just give me a big hug, you know. And it was like, I just wish I could have met him, you know. I really do. I really do.
Were they able to tell you much, the veterans that you did meet?
Well, they said he was a good-looking guy, and he smoked and drank a lot. So it's pretty much me down to a T. So I got lucky. But no, they all said they liked him, and I mean, they were kids, you know. And it's like, so when I met Heffron and Garnier and all that, they were older men. They were all like 60s, 70s, and they were remembering a guy that was 21, 22, who obviously never got old. So yeah, they had good things to say about him.
You've made a pilgrimage, sort of in the same vein as Jason, haven't you?
Going to the place where Dukeman came from, it's a tiny, tiny ass town. It's about 500 people in it. And I went into the American Legion, and they've got all the American flags up on the wall of people that died. And there must have been about 100 flags on the wall, you know. And from a town that tiny to give up that many men is insane. And that happened all across America, you know. I mean, obviously the UK as well. I mean, I'm not. The UK gave up so much, but just to see that these young lads from like BFE, middle of nowhere, came over there, gave their lives, and never went back. I mean, walking into that room, seeing all those flags from that tiny town, I just broke down. You know, it's just, my God, it's real. So I feel that every chance that I get to honor these men, I'll take it anytime, you know.
Rick Warden, do you have anything to add?
And the truth is that Harry didn't die in the war, but Harry had died in the 90s. So the connections I had with Harry, I didn't have any connections with his family when I made the series. And I did after the series. But during, Babe Heffron, the real Babe Heffron, and Wild Bill Garnier visited set during episode 3. And that was, as Dexter said, shot early on. And they literally made a beeline for me during, I think, one of the Carentan scenes, and just told me who I was playing. Just by looking at me and by what I was doing. And honestly, I not as an actor, it's not, I didn't feel like pushing. I just felt, you know what, if it's good enough for them, then I'm all right.
Nice. Jimmy, we've been talking to people about their veterans and the relationships they forged. And I know that you forged a really special relationship with Frank Piconte. What did that mean to you?
Well, for me, I think it put a lot of pressure to make sure that, you know, I get it right. And I think that goes for all of us. It was great to just get information about him and as accurate as we can be and putting him on the screen and for his family and his friends and all that. And at the same time, I know it was crucial to get information from him for the other guys, some of the other guys that Frank was close with, like a Luz or, you know, Lipton or anybody, and just kind of go, hey, here's what Frank told me about, you know, one time with the, you know, one of the other characters. So just having a relationship with him for that during filming was great. But later on in life, in our relationship, you know, I went out to Chicago maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I went out almost every year for his birthday and got really close with him. I got to, you know, tour Europe with him and go back to, we did Normandy, Holland. We went into the Ardennes at Battle of Bastogne and looked at the foxholes, you know, retraced exactly where he was shot in Foy, you know, right through his groin and came out his ass. So I got really, really close with him and went to visit him right before he passed. But it meant a lot. And, you know, I say it all the time. When you first took this job, you knew it was going to open up a lot of doors as far as, you know, for careers. You know, it's such a monumental, epic piece. But I didn't know that I was going to gain a friend like that and just become, you know, great buddies with someone and, you know, help shape kind of who I was and who I am moving forward. But a good guy. What happened was, Frank was, he was going to pass.
And tell us what happened, Jimmy, when Frank was dying, because you absolutely wanted to see him one last time, didn't you?
And I was in touch with his family, and I called HBO. You're talking, this is 14 years later after the series. Frank was like 96, 97. This is 2014, I believe. And I called HBO, a few people there who were still working in certain departments. And I told them what was happening. And within 10 hours, they had me on a flight out to Chicago to make sure that I got out there to say goodbye to him. And that's exactly what I did. But I just thought that was a testament to, the people who were involved in HBO, from in front of the camera, behind the camera, and just shipped me out there to make sure I got to say goodbye to him, which meant a lot to me.
It was hard to get these guys to talk for obvious reasons. Scott.
Rich, you taught me more about Malarkey because I think you showed up, Band of Brothers, knowing more about him than I did, because I was going to probably be a little lazy. He didn't really want to talk to me on the phone. And do you remember I had gone up to you after Frank John Hughes did that thing with his jaw, right? I'm like, well, shit, I got to do something, right? And we were sitting there at my place in South Kensington, and we're watching this tape of Don Malarkey, who's 80-something years old, and does this kind of thing with his mouth because he's old. And I turned to Richard Speight, and I'm like, should I? He's like, no, that's just because he's old. So you really got me involved in getting to know Malarkey.
You did develop a relationship, though, didn't you? How did you go about it?
I just had to call, and he would hang up on me all the time. Richard knows that, because he'd just get emotional, and you'd wait. You couldn't text somebody back then. I couldn't text him going, "You all right? Can I call you back?" So I would just get limited information from him because he would always break down. Only after we finished, and he saw, I think the original pilot when he was at the opening episode when we were at the Hollywood Bowl. Did he really start? Because I hung with his family a lot, and he saw that I was genuine. I will say this: his family did come up to me when they met me, and they told me the truth. They said, when we found out you were playing our father, we were so pissed because you're not even close to as good looking as he was. He was, and it's absolutely true. We look nothing alike, but, and I think, so after that first episode that we saw at the Hollywood Bowl, he really started to open up, and he'd still cry, but they were like, he was okay. The thing is with him is once he felt comfortable crying in front of you, he wouldn't hang up because he couldn't talk about it. He didn't want you hearing him cry, more than anything. So he would sit there in the hotel room when I met him and his family and cry and talk to me. And I'm like, oh, finally he's comfortable saying these things. And so it was just about him being comfortable. And again, like we've all said, Band of Brothers has allowed all these men to, peek out now and go, oh, the coast is clear. We're allowed to speak of this. And you'll listen and I'll cry and you'll cry and and that in itself is just such a beautiful thing that this has allowed these men to experience.
Go on, Woody, our Bobfest coordinator.
I spent quite a lot of time in Malarkey in Normandy towards the latter part of his life when he was, health was failing. But when people ask him about the show and the actors, he'd always refer to, I got to know Scott and Skip. So he referred to Scott as Scott, the actor, but he always referred to you as Skip, because I think for whatever reason, your portrayal, the way his brain had processed it, he referred to you as Skip. So that's the only little compliment I can throw your way, is he always referred to you as Skip. So I know Scott and Skip. Yeah. And we used to have to have a code when he was here, because I was here for a few days filming a few years ago. We had to have a code amongst us to try and not mention Skip, because if you mention Skip, Don would just start crying.
Yeah.
And one day it was one of the girls on the film crew said, oh, we're just going to skip over there to get a sandwich or something. and she used skip as a verb, and suddenly Don's got off again. And every single time Skip came in the conversation, he just would cry. So I don't know how you managed to get where you got information from Don about your character, because even 15 years after the show, you couldn't say Skip Mark without him crying.
You know what I think? I honestly think the reason why it worked for Garnier and Heffron, I spent a lot of time with those guys, and Tom Malarkey, is because I was Skip, and if I'm Skip, I'm alive. Yeah. So in the conversation that he's having with me with short hair, real creamed up, and in the outfit or in a bar after, and it wasn't like when we go out to bars, we suddenly look like we're in a rap act. We're kind of still dressed in T-shirts and, we look like modern versions of soldiers, if you will. And so there was a piece of connective tissue that they could emotionally link together that at once made it hard to have people like me around, people representing the fallen buddies, but also I think was cathartic because they had lost these guys in an instant, like you just talked about, McCall and Muck, gone. They were there, gone. And that was it. There was no conversation about it. Yeah. So if, however many years later, they see me or they see anybody who played in a character that passed and they can go to that person and connect with them, it's the conversation they never got to have.
The amount of ways that this show has continued to touch people for 20 years after it's been made, it's like the original binge watching series. It defined binge watching. Everybody just couldn't wait to get their hands on the next episode, and everybody remembers it, everybody rewatches it. It's just insane that it's still so loved, isn't it?
Well, it's not that just so loved, it just holds, it's so well done that it just holds to even today's standards. You look at how it was filmed, everything was very tactical, everything was hands-on. It wasn't, the big green screen episodes, that was happening, but everything else was like, okay, we got to reset a set, reset something. Okay, take 3 or 4 hours off, and let's go do something else, because they had to rebuild things. It was amazing. And everybody here, we had to make sure we did our job or else the scenes would not happen, just Carrington, all the explosions, when Rick and Welsh are behind that building, all the gunshots, and they're like going back and forth. Where the fuck is everybody? It's like, I don't know. Those shots, it's amazing how everybody had to respond at that moment. It is real surreal just looking back at it now.
Rick Gomez, did you have any idea of what you got yourself into?
I never knew. I don't think I was too young and too fucking idiotic to understand what it would be. I think by the time it dawned on me, there was a rap on 6th Avenue that early September, pre 9/11, one of the buildings on 6th Avenue. So it was all of 6th Avenue, down 36th Street, all of 5th Avenue, up 37th Street, wrapped this block-long Band of Brothers wrapped. They wrapped the entire top of this building. And I went...
Sunset Boulevard, right?
That's the show. That's that show. That's the one. That's it. And then I think at that point I was like, oh, and then it started to hit me. But I was kind of an idiot. I still am an idiot. So
And you, Philip, any idea?
At the time, I was 19 years old and I'd just come off a TV series, which was on Sky One called Dream Team. And it was like a football drama, relatively decent budget. I was on that for 2 years. I was having a lot of fun. Then I got the part in Band of Brothers, and the first day on set I was there, and it was just a different league. You kind of know that there's a lot of money being put into this. And at the time, I think it was the most expensive TV miniseries ever made. So we knew, HBO were putting a lot into it. And I guess you think, it's going to be, because Saving Private Ryan had been out and that was a huge hit. And so we all had that in the back of our minds. This is the TV series of Saving Private Ryan, that kind of sort of same people who are making it, that kind of feeling. But not in a million years did I think that 20 years later, we'd all still be in touch, because, you work on these films and TV jobs and you always say, oh, let's stay in touch. We'll be, you become really close to people when you're on set with everybody. It's like a family, but you never sort of do stay in touch, not to the extent that we have as friends and brothers. We call each other brother, and we have a WhatsApp group that we're all on, and we stay in touch as much as we can. But it's just mind blowing how popular it is, and not just with people who watched it originally when it first came out, but also like the younger generation who are also watching it now. Like my brothers, he watches it, and my cousins watch it, and they're young kids, and it's just phenomenal what with the length it's gone, and even to this day it's still recognized as one of the best TV shows ever made, which is mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did realise. I think I did realise because, as I say, when you got on set and saw, the money that was spent on the detail and the size of the thing, I just knew, and obviously, that Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg are involved. I mean, they're big hitters in the industry. So you already think I'm just lucky to be on this project. And I remember Steven coming up to me on day one of boot camp when I was in the mess hall, and he stuck his hand out and said, hey, my name's Steven Spielberg, and I was like thinking to myself, like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And I just remember the young boy in me who grown up watching E.T. and all those great films growing up, Jaws and stuff, and just thinking this is just a dream come true.
It's that weird parallel, isn't it? That you were young men thrown together to do something massive, just in a different sphere, and the way that you've sort of come out of it gelled together, like the guys that came out of the war from Easy Company were sort of tied to each other for a lot of them for the rest of their lives. There is a parallel there, even though of course you'd never be so disrespectful as to say it was the same feeling, because obviously they were in mortal danger and they were fighting a war, but there is a parallel there between the relationships that you forged. Michael?
I think that it's apples and oranges. I think there will be other things that we do, and this is not, I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but I think this is the same sort of overall way we all feel about it, is that it is its own thing, and it will never be replaced. It can be possibly matched emotionally with something that connects with you in a different way, but there's very few times where you get to do something that is not only entertaining but changes other people's lives and also changes. So I think from that perspective, I think it's a one of a kind.
Mark, that bond between you guys hasn't gone away, has it?
We all see each other now, and this is 20 years later, and we all hang out now. We got WhatsApp groups, and we mess around, and we go out drinking. And like, if somebody called me up tomorrow, I'd do something if they needed it. It's that kind of thing. So it's the most amazing show to be part of. It really is, and these men need to be honoured. I mean, thank God this show got made, so these men became immortal, hopefully.
And it's not dependent on how much you feature in the final series, is it, Jason?
It was awkward for me those first few days where, everyone's supposed to play their rank, and I had no experience. Like, I was just, coming from my apartment in London, going through wardrobe, and suddenly expected to be a leader of men. I'm just an actor who's been cast in a part. So I had to learn very quickly to try to how to do that, And Dale Dye helped me to an extent, but it was a bit of a cheat because I wasn't on boot camp. So I had no one's respect.
Yeah.
I think after the speech in the hangar, the Overlord speech, I had a bit more respect because they were like, oh, he's the guy. Okay, he's our commander. He tells us what to do. But up until that point, it was kind of awkward. And they just assumed I was, I don't know, an extra or something. They were all like, fuck you, who is this guy, So I had to kind of hold my own there. But what's amazing about them as a group is that... and I worked with Richard right after, like the year afterwards, on a series called The Agency here in Los Angeles. So I got to be quite close to Richard, and he's still a friend of mine to this day. And through Richard, and also Michael Cudlitz came and did an episode of that. Mm-hmm. So through Richard and Mike Cudlitz, I got to know those guys, and they started to invite me to the reunion because I'd moved out to LA by then. And so I've been going to the reunion most years over the last 20. And so I've got to know them after the fact. and they're a great group of guys, you know, and very welcoming, very open. They weren't at all like they were in those first couple of days. They're a very intimidating group of guys, you know, of course. But turns out they're absolute sweethearts, you know. Really nice guys, and they're good friends, and you know, they're a group of people I really rely on, you know. Great guys to have in your corner.
Yes, Peter O'Meara.
I've spoken before about when we finished the show and it was over. I think individually we all felt this really extraordinary experience to be part of it, to carry these stories. And so I'm carrying a story and somebody else is carrying their part of the story. And as men, we're maybe not so great at talking about that, about how you're feeling. But sure enough, over time, we've just kind of gravitated back into each other's lives. And it's really special and powerful. And it's not, you don't even need to see each other all the time. It's pretty special, man. I know other actors who are very successful. They've done multiple good things, but you say Band of Brothers is like, oh, that's significant. And the fact that we meet every year when we can, I don't know any other job where that happens. This is unique, and it's a testament to Michael and Frank, who I think are the core who really keep it going. Frank St. Hughes is just such a great soul, what a gifted person. And just, you know, that takes time and energy to keep track of everybody, right? And to keep us all informed as to what's going on. So I'm very grateful to be part of it.
I find it utterly lovely that Frank John Hughes, who played Wild Bill Garnier, has taken on kind of the role that Wild Bill Garnier, talking to his son and his granddaughter, appeared to have when it came to the actual members of Easy Company and their reunions, and keeping them all together and being the glue that bound them together.
Yeah, it seems to have worked out that way, that he's carrying on the Garnier legacy of being, you know, big-hearted one who checks in on everyone, right? It's very big. Most jobs you do, you have a great time, you connect with people, and then, you know, the nature of life just takes you on somewhere else. It's nice to know that we're able to reach out and talk about it. And I listen to outsiders, some people think we're crazy. like, what are you talking about? Wasn't that 20 years ago? How come you guys are still talking about it? But Band of Brothers is lightning in a bottle. It's just something in the air and the magic.
I want to finish by going to Richard Speight. How did it feel when it was all over? And try to sum up how significant Band of Brothers has been in your life. And I'm not just talking in career terms.
It was weird. I think Band of Brothers has had such a profound impact. And I'm not saying because it was a success. I'm talking about the shooting of it. The auditioning process, which was grueling and emotionally tiring. and then getting the job and the preamble to actually doing the job, which was surprising and stressful because you're talking to grown men who are bursting into tears on the telephone. And then going to do the job where, you know, I was super intimidated. You know, I'm sitting around with a bunch of actors, a lot of whom I don't know, some of whom's, you know, I recognize their face or their work, and I'm intimidated by that. Then I'm getting yelled at by military personnel, and I'm intimidated by that. And you know, everything was daunting. It was, you know, I went from doing small things to working on a giant Hank Spielberg project and carrying the weight of real men and their story of war with me the whole way. And I just found it so intense. I think that's why I got so intense about the job. Maybe it's the only way I knew how to handle it. You know, we laughed hard, we goofed hard, we cried hard, and we worked hard. And so I think all those things in various equal measures at various times. And, you know, when it was all done, it was all just surreal. And leaving that job, I left that job a different person than I arrived to it. And I guess everybody does that for every job. But this one just seemed to reshape my view of friendships, of what it meant to be an actor, what it meant to be an American, what it meant to be, what patriotism means, and what it meant to be a man. And the most emotional I got was at the premiere in France, which had been a journey. like we talked about earlier, with the families, with the guys. I mean, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't in lockstep, attached to the hip with Tim Matthews and Scott Grimes all day long. And I never called him Tim Matthews. It still feels weird to call him Tim Matthews. Pinky, Muck, and Malarkey, we were in lockstep from boot camp forward for months. Then I also became friends because of where we lived with Rick Gomez. Got to know his then girlfriend, now wife. My girlfriend, now wife, was coming out a bunch. Jimmy Madio was there. Ron Livingston was there. And we were in lockstep. Neil McDonough. And then 9 months later, it's like you are petals from the, flower blown to the four winds, and off you go. And it was very, very jarring. It was more jarring to separate than it was to join. And I knew, like, the rap party wasn't necessarily fun because I knew what I was leaving was better than where I was going in terms of the emotional content of that experience. It doesn't mean I haven't had phenomenal experiences since with work and life and everything else, but I knew I was old enough and wise enough to recognize the rareness of that experience. And it created a weight to the exit that I don't think ever left. And I mean that as a good thing. It was a monumental experience. And I remember going to the French premiere. We're in France, and I'd fought to get the family there. All these things were happening. And they had all these events set up for the veterans. And they were all staying in our hotel, and they all gave them these yellow jackets so they could recognize who they were in these giant groups. And they were loading all these guys up on a bus. And these are now old men and their wives, or old men and their buddies, or both. And they line up in the lobby of the hotel. And they're in a line and shuffling their way, the way old men kind of move, out to get on this bus. And the imagery, to me, was intense because all I could think of was stand up, hook up, shuffle to the door, which was what you did to jump out of an airplane, which is what these guys did in their 20s and their teens. And the image of these old men standing up and shuffling to the door to go back to visit the sites where they lost their friends and where they fought and where they landed. I didn't go on that tour. That wasn't for me. That was for the veterans. But I went up to my hotel room and I cried harder and longer than I've ever cried. And my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was baffled. She's like, what's wrong? And there was nothing wrong. It was just 2 years. It was 2 years of trying to do the right thing by people who did something greater than I will ever be asked to do. And trying to make playing pretend seem real so that the stories and sacrifices made by these people and their families resonated beyond the work we were doing when we were shooting it. And the connections I made with those people and those men, to have Babe Heffron sit in a bar across from you and talk to you like you are Skip Muck, because as far as Babe Heffron is concerned, you are Skip Muck. You look like Skip Muck. You're dressed like Skip Muck. You got Skip Muck's hair. Everybody around here is calling you Skip, and Babe's had a couple of drinks, and now you're Skip Muck. And the intensity that came with that, it was an honor and a pleasure, but also an intense moment to be the recipient of those stories and that emotion and that loss, and him saying, we looked through your body parts, Skip. We couldn't find any piece of you. We couldn't find a piece of you to send home. And it mattered to him to be able to say that at that moment. And it mattered that I could be Skip in that moment at a bar in civilian clothes in London going, I know, babe. I know you did. And I appreciate it. You know, to have those exchanges, they don't just bounce off you when they call rap and you get on a plane to go home. Those are part of what you become beyond that experience. They are intrinsically woven into the fabric who Richard Speight is, and how I parent, and how I raise 3 boys, and how I perceive the military today, and how I perceive my country and leadership, and how I reflect on history and everything.
We want to thank all of you for taking the time to come on and talk to us 20 years after filming. I think it's been really insightful, and I know that you guys have enjoyed catching up again. Some of you haven't seen each other for years, and obviously none of this would have happened without the tireless efforts of Woody, who has been basically working flat out to get as many of you guys on as possible over the last few weeks. We've laughed and we've joked. We've had a lot of fun. We've had some serious moments too. And just to emphasize, I think right at the end, I want to show that as much as we enjoy the spectacle as fans and as much fun as you guys had filming it, this was a real story about real men. And we're going to leave you with Jason reading the last note written by Thomas Meehan to his wife a few hours before he was killed on D-Day.
June 5th, 1944. Dearest Anne, in a few hours, I'm going to take the best company of men in the world into France. We'll give the bastards hell. Strangely, I'm not particularly scared, but in my heart is a terrific longing to hold you in my arms. I love you, sweetheart. Forever. Your Tom.